in the water,
Mm-hmm.
along a coastline, making your own lines.
Yeah.
Well, can you go into that piece
Yeah.
in more depth?
I specifically remember the moment when I was like, this is what I'm going to do. It wasn't
Wow.
like, I have a very dear friend of mine, one of my college professors. His name is Jim Baker, and he's probably 84 years old. And still, I would consider him like one of my very best friends. And he has a wonderful house up in Newport, Rhode Island. And from the age of 20, I would visit him and his wife up at his house, and we would hike the coastline. And if you've ever been in Newport before, there's the walkway along the mansions there, and there's a spot called 40 Steps. And I remember I stopped at 40 Steps, and it was a day where the ocean was as flat as a pancake. And I looked out and I saw that velvety blue just swath of water, and it looked like blue felt to me. And I was like, I want to draw on that. I want to draw a line on that. And and then I just started thinking, and it just kind of materialized. And so I worked with Jim Baker to acquire all of the buoys. I had a collection. He had a larger collection. We brought them together. And I had this idea that I was going to create this massive strand of buoys and lower it off the cliff and swim it out into the ocean. And I didn't know what kind of weight I was going to be dragging behind me. I didn't know how the water or the wind or the currents would act upon me or act upon it. And I just said, well, I'm going to train for this thing. I'm going to make this thing. I'm going to lower it off the cliff. I'm going to, I created a harness that went around my body, and I'm going to swim this thing out into the ocean and see what happens. And the sculpture itself, like it took on a life of its own. It wanted to control me, but I had a certain amount of control over it. And as I was doing the performance, I realized that it was a real give and take between the sculpture, myself, and nature. And nature was imposing its will on me and the sculpture. So there were three elements working together as I realized how my power would control this object out in the ocean. I could now use it to my advantage to create lines on the surface of the water that were predictable and often unpredictable. And I liked that. I like that.
I love the part that was a rock too, that all of a sudden then you had the rock that kind of stuck out towards like kind of the middle to the end, and then part of it kind of wanted to go on top of it, and you kind of were working around the rock. And I thought that was a really interesting added element to it too.
There was like a little eddy that like caught some of the buoys, and like they swirled around in a beautiful circle like around the rock. And I was like, wow, I didn't expect that to happen. But I think that's the
I did some drawings of that last night. Actually, I watched it and I drew along, and and because the lines were so exciting. But I think it's interesting that you talk about scale, because how you edited the video was really interesting too, because there were some parts where you had the square of water, and then sometimes you had that horizon, but it wasn't always easy to see where you were in terms of scale. And I kind of felt the same way when I looked at the Hudson bump and grind, the
Hudson River bump and grind.
Hudson River bump and grind with the ice. I love that one too, because that too was like, you watch it for the full amount of time, and then you just like, it could be, you could be looking under a microscope, those like crazy, when they take pictures of your skin, or you could be looking at a continental shelf, like shifting and changing, and that whole sense of scale. Like it was really interesting. And when you mentioned scale, about how you as a kid was trying to figure that out, I felt like I was kind of having that same experience, and just looking at those lines, those dark lines in the middle.
Yeah. That piece, Hudson River bump and grind, that piece was an epiphany also, because I was a personal trainer at Chelsea Piers when that was done. And we had gone through like a brutally cold winter. And I remember that one morning, those ice floats were not there. And then the next morning, it was like the whole Hudson River had frozen from one bank to the next. From New York over to New Jersey, it was like one like membrane of ice undulating.
I remember that winter.
It was a brutally and it was epiphany. I was like, I need to record this, because I sat there mesmerized, like looking down into the Hudson River, watching these shapes and forms rub up against each other, caress each other, undulate. And, I mean, I think the title is a little tongue in cheek. I thought it was kind of funny, but it really kind of made sense. They were bumping and grinding, and I didn't mean it to be. It was kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Tongue in cheek.
It was tongue in cheek. You're having fun.
Yeah, I didn't mean it to be sexual, but I thought it was kind of a clever title. But I was more interested in scale and shape and just the natural element, really.
Yeah, and when you watch it, when you're I'm interested in, because the length of the video, which is like, isn't that one like 19 minutes, which in these days is like a lifetime to watch the same thing. I love, this is one of the reasons that I love the performative art, and sometimes I don't know if you would call this more the video. I'm not a professional artist, so I don't know what you would call this, but again, you are forced, like you sit down and you meditate and you watch it. So I could have that same sense of being mesmerized as you were. And then all of a sudden you start getting these other ideas that come into your head, these imprints. And so I got the coastlines that you drew, the graphite drawings were coming out to me. There was one little ice thing that to me looked like Manhattan. It was really funny how that sort of came out, but it only comes out if you sit and you watch it for a while. And, again, that's why I really enjoy your work. And why art is so important in general, because it gives you that experience of, you wouldn't normally necessarily do that. If I was sitting in a gallery, it also made me, and I'm going off on tangents again, it also made me really miss the gallery experience, because I would have loved to have seen that projected on a wall and sit on my little bench and just be there in that gallery experience and have that immersive experience right there. Because for me, sitting in a gallery in New York City when I lived there I got the same kind of feeling that I did when I'm sitting in a park being in nature. And, humans, we're animals. This is our nature. This is kind of what we create. And I really kind of missed that experience. I realized how important having, those gallery spaces are. And obviously we haven't been able to have that recently.
Well, it was interesting that piece was shown at a like an alternative space right behind PS1.
Oh, amazing!
It was a great title for that show too. That show was called PS1's Backside.
So bumping and grinding. That's fantastic.
It was perfect.
It was perfect.
I know, but for that piece to be shown correctly, I needed to build a almost like a cocoon. I built a gallery within a gallery that was kind of almost soundproofed, and what part of that project was I collaborated with a sound artist named his name is Jeremy Slater, and he and I go way back, and I love Jeremy's work. Big plug to Jeremy Slater right now, because if you don't know him, you've got to look him up.
I'm writing it down.
Unbelievable sound artist, and he completely took the sound apart, mixed it, and put it back together to create this like soundscape that I thought was absolutely perfect for that piece. I don't think that like that piece would be nearly as successful without Jeremy's contribution. It was so. Anyway, you talk about like a space. You miss the gallery experience. Like that's the thing that like I miss too. You see like a Bill Viola exhibition. To just sit there mesmerized in this meditative dark space in a gallery or a museum and really feel that transcendence that video and sound can do. And yeah, that's the power of the medium, you know. It's like,
yeah, the gallery space. I mean, for me, it's like going to church.
it is.
going to the ocean's my church, but then going to a gallery space and stepping into that space, and you just take on a different, you know, you walk in and you kind of hold yourself a little bit different. Like, I'm here to open doors. I'm here to take sort of things in. And I mean, that's what you should feel if I feel like it's done right. If you come in and you're bombarded with all these things and you have these different notions, but when you walk into a space and you have that feeling of like, okay, I'm gonna take off the shackles of stuff outside, and I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna be immersed, and I'm gonna get ideas. Things are just gonna come to me. It's I really miss that. I mean, I certainly, I mean, that's what I loved about living in New York City when I did. And those are things that I miss, but I feel like that's kind of what I do now when I go into the woods or when I go surfing and do that.
For sure. I maybe Kris can agree, but I know for me, when you say it's my church, like the ocean is my church. And I also feel the same way when I'm in the presence of art. And it's quiet, and I can think, and I can look, and I can just clear my head. It's like, that's for me transcendent.
I think what we're touching on is space to think, but to think on a deeper level. I don't think that's the right word, but to go from surface level down, you know, into a more, I don't know the words for it, but it's a kind of concentration and a kind of focus where you're getting in touch with where your ideas come from and other forms of communication. I feel like when I'm looking at art, I'm having a conversation with the piece. I'm having a conversation with the person that made it. I'm having a conversation with the people that person was thinking about and influenced by. And it's, you know, this strand of connectivity.
And when you have those experiences, like you have a profound experience in the water, and when you have that experience at a gallery, I mean, we all remember times in the gallery where we're just, you know, we can't forget it. It's there in our mind. And I'm sure research, I'd be curious to know what part of our brains are lining up when we have those experiences in the gallery, in the same way that we'd have an experience in the woods or experience, you know, in the ocean. And I'm sure there's similar parts that are lighting up. Yeah,
I think it's that kind of focus. I really, when you strip away the everyday interferences, right, that we're constantly pushing back on, and we don't have that, and you're allowed to have that moment of going that step further inward, that's when those things can happen. Whether you're surfing or hiking, it happens to me when I'm in the woods too. You just get this kind of overwhelming feeling, you know?
I mean, now that we're talking, I mean, like, I don't mind admitting this, but like there have been moments when I'm in the presence of art where I'll cry.
Yeah.
And there are moments when I'm in the ocean where I'm just overwhelmed by where I am and the enormity of the element that I'm in and how small I am in comparison to that. And I'll cry. And for me, that's when I say that, like, you know, being in a museum or a gallery or being in the ocean, like, that is my church, because it's spiritual and it's transcendent, and it helps you tap into deeper places.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we return to them. You know,
I had a profound experience, actually, because I believe some places have an energy, like that place somehow there's a kind of energy there. I was, I guess almost 2 years ago, I was surfing at San Onofre, and that place has like legit, like Southern California surf history.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And I had surfed it a few times, but it was my last day on that trip, and it wasn't even a good day. Like, it was rainy. there's hardly anybody in the parking lot, which should tell you